Boom, what's up, everybody? Got Mizzou's finest, Jackie Terpak on. Super pumped because we've been able to share conversations before. So I'm excited to kind of just see where the conversations go. Always enjoys talking to you. But before we get rocking and rolling, wild or funny story. What you got for the people?
All right, this question is so challenging for me because I feel like I have so many, but I'm very much like there in the moment. I am where my feet are at, but then so much happens in my life and I just keep moving forward. So like circling back. Okay. I don't know if this is funny. You can laugh at it now, but so prime COVID era. I was
Yeah.
in it was my sophomore year of college when COVID first hit. Fast forwarding to my junior year of college, at this point I had medically retired. I was a student assistant coach and we were preparing for regionals. It was our first time. I went to Temple University. It was
Yeah.
our first time that we had ever made, or second time in school history as a team, first in like the new NQS era, all of that. And we literally had our selection show that day. One of our staff members found out they had COVID. And so
Uh-huh.
then that next night, we call like a team Zoom call, and um, with regionals being like 10 days away,
Yeah.
we were told that we had to move into isolation for 10 days. And so we had to like pack up all of our stuff, move to the absolute worst dorms on campus. Like
Yeah.
we're all isolated alone. It's basically like a cell block. I'm not even kidding you. Like,
Guantanamo
so
Bay style.
so I'm very fortunate for the dorm I lived in. But these were the dorms they're using to isolate people who had COVID. None of us had COVID, but like a staff member did. So we
Right.
were being put there in protection of like, you have regionals coming up. We're going to prevent you from getting COVID. Um, because who knows, someone could have potentially like got it from the staff member that had it already. We were
Mm-hmm.
all just watching the selection show. Um, so we moved there. Well, on the Zoom call, some of us, including myself, started to get like upset. And not because, or someone of leadership was like, you guys shouldn't be getting upset. You should be doing absolutely anything for this team to like make it to regionals. And I'm like crying. And I was like, I'm not upset that I have to do something for the team. We all know I'll literally do absolutely anything for this team at any moment. I was like, I'm just upset that I have to like abruptly, it's like 12 hours. You have to be out of your home. And like
Yeah.
that's my safe place and like that's my secure place. And so I was just like not mentally prepared for that, but adaptability, what we talk about all the time. Um, and so we were in there for 10 days. We had to get tested very often. We were
Yeah.
only allowed to leave to go to practice, and we weren't allowed to practice at the same times. So think about the challenge our coaches had, like
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
doing individual practices like all the time. Um, and we were getting tested and everyone was negative. And at that point we had gotten tested 4 times. We're on the very last day. We get tested in the morning, but then after we get tested, they're like, everyone's good to go because the
Mm.
4 previous times we got tested, everyone was negative. So we leave and we're back in our house, like with our roommates. And then all of a sudden that night, people got called that they were tested positive,
Uh,
and including one of my roommates. And so then it was like, they can't go to regionals. And I was like, I've been back in the house with them. I can't go to regionals. And fortunately, I wasn't an athlete at the time. Like, I was a student coach, like I said. So I wasn't contributing routines. And so I called my coach and I was like, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to risk anyone like getting COVID because my roommate has it. And we were let out before they told any of us like what the
yeah.
final results were. And so, unfortunately, the team didn't get to compete at regionals.
Damn.
But like still half the team still traveled there since like some of us stayed home because we were like exposed to our roommate that was
Mm-hmm.
already,
Mm-hmm.
and so half the team still traveled to regionals, but then once they were there, more people tested positive. And so that, as like unfortunate as it was for a season to be cut short for a second year in a row, we didn't get to compete at regionals. We look back at it now and it's just like, holy crap, like this is the stuff that's going to be written about in history books
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
if I'm ever fortunate enough to have a kid, my kid will read about.
Yeah.
And then it's like I was really living in that, like that really happened, and it was
Madness.
chaos.
And we won't
Yeah,
go down the rabbit hole, but now it makes you scratch your head.
yeah, it was insane. But that's just like something I'm like, it's not like a funny story, but it's something
Just
wild that
wild.
happened in
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah,
life. Yeah,
totally.
it's just
Totally.
wild. And it's like I shared it with so many people and I'm like absolutely loved my time in college and like loved the people I was with and to look back at it now and it feels like I don't know, it feels like it was so long ago, but it really wasn't. I guess it was kind of long ago, like 4 years ago. I don't know. But
Yeah, but
at
it
the same
doesn't
time, it was
seem
like
that long
yesterday.
ago. It's like,
Yeah.
stay at home, don't be on the streets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lock down the entire world, literally.
Yeah. And as scary as that time was such a pivotal time. But yeah, that's my story for you.
Yeah,
That
madness,
it was
madness.
crazy.
So did
Yeah.
you I don't know that I don't know that I knew that you medically retired in college like
Yes.
competing. And so I guess like one of the questions like I always tend to ask, one of the most common questions like especially coaches is ask everybody is did you always know like coaching was going to be a thing or at that time was it just kind of like almost convenience of the sense of like I can't compete, but I like still want to be involved in the thing. And so it's like you spent a year, 2 years, however long it was, like involved in the thing, and then that evolved into like, oh, like hey, like I actually am pretty good at this. Hey, I actually can
Yeah.
bring value. Maybe I like want to do this as a career versus like I don't know, maybe you were like into nursing or like whatever it else was
hmm
before, and that was kind of like the trajectory of your life, or kind of how did that evolve for you?
So I always knew I wanted to work in sports and like specifically college sports. When I was
Yeah.
younger, majority of TV I watched was ESPN, and then I homeschooled in 6th grade, and at the time, Gymnastics was, like, the gymnastics webpage. They did, like, workout Wednesdays, and, they toured college facilities and covered meets and stuff, and that then Flow Sports bought it, turned into Flow Gymnastics, blah,
Okay.
blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the year I was homeschooled, so it was actually 5th grade, I didn't really get my schoolwork done because I was just on gymnastics all the time.
Browsing. Yeah.
And my 5th grade self was researching colleges, even though I was very far
Yeah.
from
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I literally just spent my time like watching sports, watching gymnastics, researching colleges. And so I was just like obsessed with college athletics. And so I always knew that I somehow wanted to go into that.
Mhm.
Um, and then once college hit, um, I was originally a film and media major, and then I switched to sports management because I knew I wanted to work in sports. And then I switched to media studies and production and minored in sports management because I still was like, media is something I'm really good at, but want to work in sports. So we'll figure it out. Um, and then following my sophomore year, my coaches and I decided it was best if I medically retired. Just it was actually because of mental health reasons. And so
Yeah,
to
yeah.
prioritize myself, like at the time, and also what was best for the team. I was really not well. And so when you can't take care of yourself or you're not in your best place, you can't take care of the people around you. And so that impacts your teammates at the end of the day, and that impacts your coaches and literally everyone you work with. And so, um, I was fortunate that the staff like gave me the opportunity to stay as a student assistant coach and
Yeah.
saw the additional values I brought to the team beyond just the gymnastics. Um, and so that happened, and I always again, I knew I wanted to continue to somehow work in college athletics, but I think and I always knew coaching was, like, in the back of my it was one of my options along
Yeah.
with a few other interests, and so I didn't officially decide I wanted to coach until senior year. I was actually like, I was
Mm.
offered some jobs within media, like, SID jobs and video coordinator stuff and all of that, and I just decided that I didn't want to work in media and I want to coach, and that's the route I took. And I just used my media skills as a skill I have now as a coach because not a lot of people have it, and we know how important
Totally.
social media and TV and broadcast, like everything is nowadays for the exposure of our sport. So it's just a skill I have,
Yeah.
um, and that's kind of how I got into coaching.
So circle back to well, I didn't know again, like going back to like I didn't know like you medically retired. I think it's super powerful. Because like as you kind of know a little bit, like the whole like identity like is my jam. And
Yeah.
so having that conversation, I guess touch on a little bit I guess like take me back to like where you were like mentally, like in that
Mhm.
place of like the struggles that like you felt because for me is I firmly believe that not everybody, but a lot of people experience those, but it just like struggle to like have those
Yeah.
conversations or just like bring them forth, whether it just be, you know, overwhelmed or stressed about
Yeah.
life to like, do I even want to be here anymore kind of type areas,
Yes.
right? Like
Yeah.
to totally into the spectrum. But I guess like where was it for you? Because obviously I want to get into like the rabbit hole of like, I'm sure that's like, again, you talk about added value of like what your the added value of the conversations you have like with your kids now, because it's like now we can relate, right? Like now we
Yeah.
can have a
Yeah.
conversation. We're not the same, it's not the exact same experience, but
Yeah.
like I can like sit down and be like, okay, like let me take you back and understand, like I kind of
Yeah.
feel what you feel a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Wait, the first part of the question, just circling back to
Yeah, like take me back, like where were you? Like what was it like for you that like, hey,
right.
like this isn't just healthy for me. It's like I need to take a step back and like
Yeah.
focus on me. What was it? Like I guess like what was the emotion back then? Was it just
Mhm.
being like too stressed or too overwhelmed or
Yeah.
angry or frustrated or disappointed? Like what was it for you?
Yeah. Well, circling back to like freshman year of college, came in, and obviously if you've been through college, you know, like freshman year is a transition. And so I went through freshman year and I was like, I was going through some things and I was like, it's just freshman year. Like that's
Yeah, yeah,
normal.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
everyone goes through stuff freshman year. And then sophomore year came around and I honestly got to even a darker place where I just was at a point where I was unhappy with myself. It was all like self internal work I had to do. It was not a situation where I didn't like my coaches or I didn't like my school or like a transfer, like kind of thing. No, I loved where I was at. I loved the people that I was around. I was at a point where I was just going through a lot of struggles. That I had to handle internally. And I was at a place that honestly, I hated myself. I hated gymnastics. It was the darkest place I had ever gotten to in my life. And those that knew me before college, like I was always happy. I was never
yeah,
crying. Like I was just level headed all the time. Kind of like the peacemaker, civil, all the things. And so sophomore year was a huge challenge for me in so many different aspects between gymnastics, between personal relationships. Um, Actually, school was probably the best school I had ever done in my life, which is crazy.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure I got like a 4.0 my sophomore year, but um, it just took me, I was in a place where I was just really unhappy with myself. Again, I was fortunate to be surrounded by people that like recognized that and were like,
right.
"You're not okay." And I was like, "You're right, I'm not okay." Um, and I was going to therapists. I tried 3 different therapists by the time I had one, that I
Yeah,
stuck with, and then eventually, you know, agreed that I should be done with the sport physically. I wasn't done with the sport mentally because I loved it for so many other reasons, but physically doing it was just not good for
yeah,
my mental health anymore. Um, and so that decision was made once COVID hit. Once I actually got to go home and sit down and like really process everything and really process where I was in life and like what was going on in my brain, and what I needed to do to get better and to become a healthier version of myself.
yeah.
So that really happened when we were like all in lockdown at home. So almost fortunate that I got the chance to like
Yeah, go a little
sit
bit of a
and
blessing in disguise. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was absolutely a blessing in disguise. That's one of like there's 2 times in my life and that was one that was like that was the biggest blessing in disguise, that, obviously I didn't see coming. And so that's kind of where I was at, that sophomore year and what I went through to get to the point of where I decided to medically retire.
Yeah, it's fascinating too, is it like one of the examples I always give is because you brought up like freshman year. It's like, oh, there's this transition year.
Yeah.
And so one of the things like I always say is I'm like fill in the blank, like right, like talking to like a team or something. I'm like, fill in the blank. College is going to be the time, and they're like, of your life. And I'm like, but you just told me that like the number one emotion you feel on a day to day basis is stressed and overwhelmed. So
Hmm.
explain to me, right? And so it's like there's this story that's implanted in you
Yeah.
before you come to college. It's like, dude, this is going to be the greatest time of your life. And you get
Yeah.
here and you're like, what the fuck? Like, what just happened? Like, I literally just got smacked in the face of like, because
Yeah.
for most people is like they haven't had to make all the decisions on their own, right?
Hmm.
Like maybe a good chunk of decisions. Or for some people, the first decision they ever made in their life was where they wanted to go to school. And that's
Mhm.
literally the first time that they've
Yeah.
made a decision
Yeah.
in their life. And now they got to make every single decision every single day. And they're like,
Yeah.
uh, and it's fascinating too, because if you look at it from a like if you look at it from a like a time investment standpoint,
Mhm.
is it's actually almost cut in probably half before when you came in, because in club, right? Like you train 80 hours a week, right? Now
Yeah.
you train 20-ish, right? Give or
Mhm.
take. And then like school is like if you went to public school, you go 8 hours times 5 days a week. So you're 40 hours a week. Most of these kids take like 12 hours in a semester, right? And so it's like,
Yeah.
dude, you're going to school like 4 hours a week. And they're like, damn,
Yeah.
I never really thought about it like that. And so it's like, how do you become more stressed, but you're like literally doing less?
Yeah. Um, and circling back, like what you said about freshman year in college just being like the time of your life, I do agree that it is like the best 4 years of your life, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it's sunshine and rainbows, right? I think it's the best 4 years of your life because you really find out who you are, like as a person and the experiences you go through. And so I would not be the woman I am today if I hadn't gone to Temple and hadn't gone through what I went through. And so I'm so fortunate, as dark as a place as I got, that I went through those. And because now as a coach and just as a human being, I can help those around me and like understand them much more, or understand what they might be going through, or it just made me have a new lens on life. And so I'm very fortunate I went through those things to be at the place I am now, and just to kind of pay that forward and keep moving forward and do positive things with it.
Yeah.
Um, but also you mentioned like that stress, and I it was depression, anxiety. I was stressed all the time. I ended up having panic attacks before practice. I had never like ever in my life
Yeah.
had panic attacks or a sign of it. And so that was like very abnormal. I just realized the things that like I was really good at before, I wasn't good at anymore, or like not that I wasn't good at them, I was just struggling with them. And so like didn't really know how to deal with that because that was all new for me, and a lot of people around me didn't know either because that was abnormal for me, and that's not the person they knew or like were dealing with before. And so it was tough to navigate, but again, I'm thankful I went through it because if I didn't, I wouldn't be again the woman I am now, or the coach I am now, or just the person I am now, in order to do greater things in my life and help other people.
Yeah, totally. Like if college had been the script you written in your head, then you like like right, like you would not be sitting in that
Yeah.
chair right now, right? Like it would be something
Yeah.
probably
Oh,
totally
absolutely,
different.
absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah, like you would definitely be like in the media side, 100%. 100%. I
Yeah.
can probably say that with pretty good if it had
Or
been like the script.
yeah, either on the media side or like not knowing what I wanted to do. And again, it's like we talked about the like stress of it. I was really good at time management, and I was really good at loading my plate with things that people were like, "Are you a unicorn? Like how are you doing all this?" So I was good at that. Um which I'm very fortunate for, and so that set me up afterward. But when I medically retired from gymnastics, it allowed me to just focus in on those things more. It's not like I couldn't do them when I was a student athlete, because I believe as a student athlete, your experience is what you make it. And like, just there's so many resources there. I know it seems hard. I know time management is hard and it's time consuming, but you have so many resources around you and amazing people around you, that are literally there to help you. Like a lot of us staff would not have jobs if it weren't for the student athletes. So we are there to serve you, to help you, to like make your goals and dreams come true. But you have to use the resources, and you have to start the conversations, and you have to be willing to ask for X, Y, and Z. And so I did that as an athlete. And then
Yeah.
once I was no longer an athlete and student coaching, which I still went to every single practice, I was there every single day, same amount of hours. I was just doing different things in the gym than physically doing gymnastics. And so I still had that on my plate. Um, but it again, like I reevaluated my life and where I was at, and put more time into those other things than letting those few things that I was struggling at before just totally consume my life and kind of take me away from the other stuff that I had the opportunity to do.
Yeah. And it's getting for yourself at the time as an athlete to understand, and then now like your athletes to understand is, again, it just comes down to like stories. It's like you don't lack resources, you lack
Yes.
resourcefulness. And
Mhm.
so it's like they're drastically different because we want to tell the story. It's like, well, I don't have this, or I don't have X, or I don't have Y. And it's like, yeah, but you have so many other things that you're not willing to be resourceful with
Yeah.
like what you have. You have access, like you're an athlete on a major campus. Like you're more than privileged, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you can pull strings that other people can't. It's like
Yeah.
how much of you willing. It's funny is I didn't even realize he was this young. The episode that I had posted like before this, he's player development at Tennessee. He's like early 20s. God, I think I remember he's like 21. And like I'm like,
Wow.
how did you like get in
Get
here?
to
And
where,
he was,
yeah.
yeah. And he was like, one thing's like my dad taught me. He's like, when I got to like schools, he was like, I literally just went and found the important people, so to speak. And he's like, I just started knocking on their
Yeah.
doors. And he's like, I just
Yeah.
started having conversations with them. So he's like, I was going to presidents of the school. I was going to the athletic directors. I was going to these people and just being seen and being heard. Right. So at some
Yeah.
point I was denied a lot, but at some point they're damn, like he's learning and he's evolving. And so it's like,
Yeah.
let's give him a position. So it's like
Absolutely.
being resourceful about like
Yeah.
where you are.
Yeah. And even my time at Temple, like shout out to Christy, she was our like director of compliance, but she would come in the gym, and if she came in the gym, people thought we were like in trouble. They're like, "Why is
Yeah.
Christy here?" Like we
That
were just, I'm like,
compliance.
yeah. And I'm like, have you guys ever just like talked to her? Like I would just stop in her office, and I still go back and stop in her office now. And I'm like, everyone of leadership, everyone who's an AD, an assistant AD, the president, like all those people, in reality, they're all very normal people. Like if
Yeah,
you just sit
yeah.
down and have a conversation with them, like you realize maybe how much you have in common, or like, their purpose of being here, their purpose of doing what they do, or like things they're passionate about. And so at the end of the day, you just kind of realize like a lot of people are made to be this big, huge thing in their head. And absolutely they are amazing people and extremely successful, but they were you not long ago, or they were
Yeah.
you one day, and like in your exact shoes or in similar ones. And so it's like, how do they get to where they are? And like we have a lot more in common than you think. And so kind of,
And helping
yeah.
them realize too is a lot of it's kids, but some of it's not. Some of it is adults. Is like you're viewed in that same light too, right? Like
Yeah.
people don't know,
Yeah.
like especially 10-year-old like gymnasts, right? Like that come to all the
Yeah.
meets, right?
Yeah.
Like they literally they if they were in your presence, they wouldn't even know like how to have a
Yeah.
conversation with you because they'd
Hmm.
be like, "Oh my God," right? Like because they see you that way. And so it's
Yeah.
like when you can see yourself, it's like, "Oh, like I
Hmm.
that way, superstar, whatever word you want to use," then it allows you to me, like it gives you that confidence, that nudge to like go into the next person's
Yeah.
office, right? It makes me think of I heard this because I used to always ask kids in the gym is like curiosity to me is like one of the most like important things that like you
Yeah.
can give people. And so I would ask people all the time. I'm like, who do you look up to, right? Like, who's somebody that it could be an athlete, it could be a celebrity, it could be anybody. Pre- Preferably not like a parent or something, somebody you don't have access to
Yeah.
right now. And so,
Okay. Yeah.
I always follow up with, I'm like, okay, if you could only ask them like one question, what would your question be? And it's
Oof.
like most people, right? Like most people like
Yeah.
don't know, or like kids. I'll never forget this. Is I asked a kid he was in middle school and he was a soccer player. And he's like, Ronaldo. He's like, that's who I would want to have a conversation with. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, what would your one question be for Ronaldo? And he goes, think I would ask him how many goals he wants to score next season. And it's
Yeah.
like, I'm like, yeah, right. I'm like,
Wrong question.
how does that help you? Right. But like
Yeah.
again, most people
Yeah.
don't know how to have those
Yeah.
conversations. They want to talk to them about what they think's important to them versus like,
Yeah.
how can I drive value for myself?
Yeah. And that's something I even will like sit back myself and realize like I can't be ignorant to other people that maybe don't have the social skills I do, or like don't have that comfortability of just talking to someone or asking questions. Like I'm an investigator. I'm always curious. I always just ask questions because I like to know like where people came from, why they
Why?
work the way they do.
Why? Yeah,
Yeah, why?
why?
The question why. And so, but I realize that not everyone is like that. Um, but that's also a skill people could work on and learn because they recognize it's valuable. I'm not good at every single skill in the book. There's stuff that I know I need to work on as well. We all do. We're all consistently learning.
Totally.
Students of life is like what I say. I'm like, we're students of life, everyone around you. I actually had the opportunity to speak to SAC here, which is the Student Athlete
Yeah, yeah,
Advisory
yeah.
Group, or committee for people who don't know. And they were talking about it and asking like what advice would I give myself, and I was like, to give myself grace. But I was like, actually, to give others grace, like reminding myself when I'm younger to give others grace because everyone's living their first life and their only life. And so we're all learning day by day, whether it's your president or your athletic director, your coach, your teammate, a younger gymnast, a younger athlete, whatever they may be. And so kind of looking at life with that approach of like, people make mistakes. Like you're not going to be the only one to make a mistake, and not everyone knows how to handle every single situation
Mhm.
perfectly. And so giving grace to those around you, including yourself, because we're all living our first life.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and
yeah.
it makes me think of too. It's like I have to remember, and I try to say this almost like start 50% of the conversations off
Mhm.
like this. I'm like, I haven't always thought like this. So let me be clear
Yeah.
about that, right?
Yeah.
Like it
I
took
did not always think like this.
28
No.
years to learn this. So don't like when I tell you this, I'm not saying this, I was
Yeah.
born this way. It's like I have it. It took
Yeah.
me
No, I was
forever.
not born this way. No.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I didn't realize, like, I truly didn't have this mindset or approach until probably like 3 years ago, 3 or
yeah,
4 years ago. Like,
yeah,
again, I had to go through really hard, pivotal times in my life to be like, you know what? This is where I'm at. This is like a mindset that keeps me at peace and like keeps me appreciative of those around me and considerate of those around me. Right.
yeah, yeah. All right, I want to circle back to something is you
Okay.
mentioned like when you were talking about like as an athlete and you were talking about time management and like you were really good
Mhm.
at like putting things on your plate.
Yeah.
And so it always why I asked earlier, I was like, what was the emotion that like you felt?
Mhm.
Because I feel like, oh, actually, like in a lot of aspects, like I know is we become addicted to those emotions. We don't like to be
Mhm.
liars, so like we like to see those
Yeah.
things as true. So subconsciously, it's like we do the things to make sure that we fulfill the stories that we tell ourselves. And so
Mhm.
it's fascinating, especially I feel like this is like a common like gymnast trait too, is because they're
Yeah.
like right, like most of them like addicted to stress, right? Like just
Yeah.
totally addicted to stress. I'm like, true or false? Like you love making really long to do, like you wake up in the morning and think about all the things that you have to do
Yeah.
because it feels good to be like overwhelmed for the day. And you like the satisfaction of just like checking the thing off versus like
Getting stuff
those
done. Yeah.
those 50 things could literally be condensed into like three, right?
Yeah.
They're like, I have to put the laundry in the basket and then I have to take the basket to the washer and then I have to put the clothes in the I'm like, whoa,
Step by step. Yeah.
whoa, whoa, right? And so
That's
it's
so
like
true. Yeah.
helping them like learn, it's like it's not as much as you think. I'm not saying that it's not stressful, but you are writing a story to fulfill
Yeah.
that need of a feeling
Yeah.
like gotta be stressed. I gotta be stressed.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong on that part. And I didn't even realize or like think of it that way, but I feel like it's definitely a gymnast thing. And just like the time management, the step by step, because like, we're perfectionists in this sport.
A lot of
And so
type
it's like,
A. Yeah, a lot of type
yeah,
A.
a lot of
Yeah.
type A. And then if you're on time, you're late. If you're 15 minutes early, you're on time, like that kind of stuff. And so, no, I absolutely agree with that standpoint and like everything you just said there. So,
Because it's even like, I mean, you relate a lot to this, especially now as like a coach too, is I
mhm.
had to learn this just in my journey, like within the sport too,
Yeah,
is especially like at practice, like the need to feel that addiction to being stressed and overwhelmed. It's like, hey, you guys are gonna do one routine today, and they're like, I don't know if I can handle it. Right? Like, and it's like,
yeah,
dude, last year you did like 15 of practice. So I'm really
yeah,
confused, right? Like, and so it's like, again, it's that need to fulfill of like,
yeah,
I'm literally cutting it by like 7,000%. Like, I don't know like how I can make
hmm,
it any easier like for you. But when you're addicted, it's like I gotta
yeah.
tell the story the way that's gonna like serve me best.
Yeah, and even from that standpoint, like people underestimate themselves so much. We're talking about oh, they have 2 routines and they're like, ugh, I don't know if I can do that today. Shannon talks about all the time, like your mind will quit before your body does,
Yeah.
right? And so, but they underestimate themselves. I think not only athletes in general, but like everybody in general, like
100%.
estimates what they can do. It's just how, like, let's say you do stack your days with 100 things to do. Just having the approach of like, okay, if I don't get it done today, I can move it to the next day, like no big deal. And I think the COVID reference I referred to earlier, or like my original story of like it was chaos.
Yeah.
That time in my life made me had to learn to go with the flow. I was not someone that went with the flow. I was super like, yes, and I wouldn't necessarily say this is like had to do with my time management because I'm still someone like super scheduled now, but I was like super scheduled and then lacked the adaptability piece a little bit. And so
Yeah.
I think because of COVID and that whole era and those few years that it was like super prominent in all of our lives, I had to learn how to go with the flow. You never know what was going to happen. You never know if your practice was going to get canceled. You never know if you had to get called in to get tested. You never knew who was going to get sick around you or like who you had to go take care of or like to stay away from, like whatever it is. I think that really made me learn how to go with the flow a little bit more. And I will
Yeah.
say this team's been pretty impressive and like obviously everyone goes through their own things, but like keeping the energy in the gym calm, right? And just getting stuff done. So,
Yeah, and I think too is like it's a little bit like cliche, but helping them understand, or just people in general understand, is I think there's too much like positive self-talk, right? Like I'm just not a firm believer in just
really.
no. No. Okay, so all right, I'll give you an example. So because I think it's really common like in sports too, right? And so we'll go like the short story version is, so like one of the first things to do to come in is help them understand thoughts and feelings, call them
Mhm.
emotions, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so is there's a whole way to do it, but at the end, it's like I can prove that feelings are 5 times more powerful than your thoughts. And so they're like,
Mhm.
okay, like I can buy that, right? Like I can at some level I can get down with that. And so the example is like, how many of you guys have ever walked up to the beam really nervous, right? Could have been the biggest meet, could have been at nationals, could have been at regionals, could have been just your first meet ever, right? Like in
Yeah.
college in your home arena, right? And like you get nervous. And the theory is like I should just be able to talk my way into performing really well. And so I was
Mhm.
like, how many of you guys go up to the beam and you're like, you got this, you got this, you got this, but you're really about to shit your pants, right? And so like the feeling inside of you
Yeah.
overrides the like you got this because you're like this, like walking up, you're trying not to hold it. And so the idea here is I'm not saying thoughts don't matter because they do, right? Like I'm self-talk is a piece of the puzzle, but to me, like by and in and of itself is going to be very, because your feelings are going to override it every single time. If you get
Mhm.
scared, if you get, that's what's going to show up on the back end of it. And so I think helping them understand is it's not, it's learning to manage those emotions
Yeah.
in the moment, because I think a lot of them is like, okay, so what you're saying is to never feel stressed. Okay, well, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, no, that's not what we're saying. Is it's like we have to wire you, literally rewire you to feel differently than what you felt before, because
Mhm.
screaming in the mirror your affirmations every morning is probably not going to like override the whole like I'm terrified on beam or whatever it is. I'm terrified to just public speak, right? Like it can be anything. I'm terrified to go ask the athletic director the question, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, how do we rewire like the emotional side of that? It's the same. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I don't buy into like the fake it till you make it, because to
Interesting.
me,
Yeah.
if that was true, then you would score a 10 every time, because you would just go up and fake it and you would do it and like you'd be
Yeah.
done with it.
Yeah. I totally like see your points on all those. It's interesting to hear because I feel like I never hear people say that out loud. And I think for me personally or something our staff does well on just communicating to the athletes. It's like feel those feelings, like they're there, feel them, but what are you gonna do about them? How are you gonna minimize them? You know, like minimizing the mistakes, minimizing the feelings. So like feel them, be aware of them, but now what are you going to do to either make the situation better or make yourself feel better? Or and part of that, like you said, positive self-talk is a step. It isn't the only thing that's gonna
It's a piece of the
It's not
puzzle.
going to heal all
Yeah.
wounds. It's
Right,
not,
right.
yeah. But I do think it's an important piece of the process, to get to that point of just feeling a little bit better, feeling a little more confident, figuring things out, being problem solvers. That was what our staff is so good about, is just being problem solvers, like finding a way. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna get better. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think is, well, to your point too, is you do want to feel them because, as the analogy I always give, if I walk in a room and shove you, what are you going to do? They're like, we'll shove you back. I'm like, okay, so if you do that with an emotion, right, the moment you
yeah.
feel stress and you go punch it, it's going to punch right back, right,
Hmm.
and then it starts to, and then
Yeah.
it's a brawl, so it gets
Yeah.
worse, right. And so it's like, if I can acknowledge, I see you in the room, oh hey, I didn't know you were going to be here, right, like kind of
Yeah.
acknowledging the emotion, it's more cool, calm, and collective, and
Yeah.
I can actually start to manage that versus
Yeah.
trying to like come in and start a brawl with it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. Wait, so I'm just curious now. Like, I feel like we should debate. Like, do you agree or disagree with the um self-talk, fake it till you make it theory?
I
What's your
like
take, I guess?
what's my take? Oh, controversial. No, I'm kidding. Um, I in ways believe in both, but I also am very aware that it's like not, it doesn't solve everything. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like I think sometimes you need it in the moment just to like switch the mindset a little bit. But I also know it's not going to solve all the problems. So I'm not like against it. I don't not believe in it, disagree with it, whatever that phrase may be. But it's also like I recognize it's not the only tool to get
Yeah.
the athletes to where they want to be at mentally, physically, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or even in your day-to-day life. Like sometimes you just need like a boost for a second to like get you out of it and then you're like, okay, you know? But again, that same feeling will probably circle back because you're not doing something about it on the back end, front end, whatever it may be to solve the problem. But I think it is helpful in moments.
Yeah. 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 I think too is I think where it becomes helpful. So I call it like stacking your deck, right? Like, how do you have undeniable proof you can do the thing? And so I think that's where kind of the thoughts come in. It's like when I can think about all the evidence that I've built along the way that
Yeah.
allows me to like feel. So like
Hmm.
it's almost
Yeah.
like combining them together
Your
as like
undeniable
a
proof.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%, right?
Hmm.
Like, so it's like I go back and think about like, okay, where is all that proof, all that evidence? Where's the entire deck of cards to where it's like I
Yeah.
know that I can do this. And so to
Yeah.
me, kind of like that helps kind of like shift some of that emotion away from like, are you sure you have this, to like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I got this, right? Like I know I'm a little
Yeah.
nervous, but like that's okay because like I have all the proof that
Yeah.
I've done the thing. And now I can just, doesn't guarantee success, right? But like now I can just go out and let the cards kind of fall
Yeah.
where they may, so to speak.
And that's something we talked about with our team too this year, like how you mentioned saying, I'm a little nervous. Like, all right, bring come to the coaches. If you're feeling that way, let it out, because there are situations where someone's feeling nervous or maybe just paying a lot of mind to a negative emotion. And if you're speaking that out loud, that can travel to the people around you and that
Totally.
can affect the people around you. And so it's
Totally.
like it's okay to think those things and feel those things. Bring it to us. We'll talk about it quick or just let it out. And then it's another thing we also work on is just rephrasing it.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
like you can feel those emotions, but when you say it out loud, maybe let's rephrase it a different way. Um, or like whatever that negative self-talk may be. Or so that's kind of another area I view, or another way I view the positive self-talk, just like rephrasing it so you're not paying so much negative energy to something. Like the whole protect your energy. I'm like, protect the energy, save it, like be as positive as possible while recognizing that not everything is perfect, not everything is sunshine, rainbows all the
Right.
time,
Right.
right? Yeah.
And I think is I love that too because I do think it is a piece of the puzzle. Like words
Yeah.
matter, and so it's
Yes.
like a couple of the examples I always say is like if I say I'm hungry, that feels one way, and if I go I'm starving, that
That
feels
feels
it's
yeah.
literally the same
Yeah.
thing. Or like if I tell you I'm like, hey, I have some nutritious snacks next door. You're like, okay. If I'm like, hey, dude, I got some delicious snacks like next
Yeah.
door, like it just
Yeah.
feels differently, right? Like words matter. And I think,
Yeah.
especially at that age, it's like they just toss around words like without even
Yeah.
knowing. And I'm like, be careful, like, because like
Yeah.
there is power in those.
Recognize what you're saying. Yeah, there's power to your words, absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you like that's kind of like how our like I guess like relationship started was like
Yeah.
in the personal development, just kind of like sharing conversations. How did that like I don't know how that spark for you?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it was first having to do a lot of learning about myself. And so I got into like reading self-help books and just things that could maybe switch my mindset or
What's your
maybe help
go-to?
me.
Because you asked me one time, what's your go-to?
What was my go-to? I don't know if I have a go-to.
Like what's one that like for you even just like mentally reference back to like oh yeah like that I remember like that helps
Well,
you or like
the
you talk
first
about like with the kids.
the first book um I ever read that probably stuck with me in college. This was me trying to get out of my funk,
Mm-hmm.
find a way. Well, it was The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that one. So that was probably like the first book I read that, I took some knowledge from and decided to go into other books. Other ones I can remember reading was The Power of Now,
Yeah.
The How
That's
of Happiness, one I just read recently that Jordan actually lent to me. Was how to like influence people or influence
how to
friends,
how to
how to find friends,
win friends and
win friends.
influence people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Dale
one. I was like,
Carnegie.
I don't
That's a good
like I
one.
forget. Yeah, that was a good one. I just read that. Well, earlier in the year, I
Yeah.
had read that. Um, and now I'm reading Atomic Habits, which we talked about. So
Yeah.
yeah, but kind of how I got into it was just from having to do so much self-reflection and finding ways I could just better myself, whether that was mentally. But I also always had a little bit of passion for leadership and just helping others. And that kind of, I think, just developed through sport. And then, especially in college, like just kind of one from the situation I was in, two from the people I was around and the people that were empowering me, and then
Mm-hmm.
also using my resources and seeing the opportunities it gave me that, just gave me confidence to kind of help others or like give my advice to others or lead by action or whatever that might be. So I think I've always had a little bit of a natural sense of like helping others, but then
Mm-hmm.
in college became more intentional about it of um I'm doing these things now. I'm like, let's say I'm reading or I'm going to conventions or these speakers that I also believe like knowledge is power. So
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, the more knowledge the better. Like I just like love to learn. Which is not something I would have said in high school because I did not like school in high school. And then, got to college and became a better student, became a better student of life, and learning all the things. But I think that was probably the pivotal time where I became more intentional about it. And so, not necessarily say that it was never like on my mind of professional development or human development, whatever that may be. But with the resources I had, with the people that I was surrounded by, with the things I was going through at the time, just kind of opened a new door. And I was more aware and more intentional
Yeah.
with the rest of my college career and, took advantage of the opportunities of the speakers and just conversations of the people working around me every single day. Like we had career development staff there. So career wise, professional wise, like that was nice. And then I was also involved in SAC. Um,
Yeah.
I helped start a DEI group on campus. Like there were so many things that kind of fueled that passion, um, and that I got to do in that time of my life that have carried to where I'm at now. And I've even come across so many more people that have opened my mind. Example, how I worked at Arkansas last year. Jordan Weaver's she loves leadership, like so passionate about it. She recommended that book to me, actually lent it to me. And so it's just like even people like that and the people I'm with now, like they love learning and they love growing. And we obviously clearly are working in a profession where we have a passion for helping others and these student athletes and helping them learn and grow and gain more knowledge on the professional development side of things, student athlete development side of things. So I guess you would say that's where college is really where it started to be intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I'll say too is I'll go a step further than your knowledge is power comment.
Mm.
Because I think there's one caveat to that. And you're actually just listening to, you're really good at it. And I don't know how much you recognize it. Because reframed in another way is knowledge is potential power because you can go to the conference, you can read the book, but if you don't do anything with it, it's kind of
Yeah.
meaningless. And so it's like you said, it's like I did this, I did this, I
Yeah.
did this, I read this, and then I did
Yeah.
this. And so it's like you're really good at like not just taking the knowledge in, but going out and actually implementing it into your
Yeah.
life. And I think that that's where I go kind of the resourcefulness a little bit
Mhm.
too is I think oftentimes even when like if people athletes or whoever, coaches, like whoever, it's like come have conversations with me is like I'm like if you don't do anything, then it literally like our
Yeah.
conversations are pointless, right? Like
Yeah.
I can teach you for days on end, but I don't know how meaningful it's going to
Yeah.
be because you literally haven't even done the first thing that I asked you to do,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like I think for you kind of recognizing a large part of like a strength for you, like a superpower, whatever you want to call it, is like I think utilizing it and telling people it's like, hey, like I've recognized that, because you're better off of like rereading those 3 books for the rest of your life and continuing to implement than reading 100 books and be like, look, I
Yeah.
read all these books, but I didn't do
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah. No, I do have to reread sometimes, and thank you. I do appreciate pointing that out and recognizing that. I'm not sure. And now thinking about it, I'm like, I wonder where that came from, or like when that really started. And I don't necessarily have the answer, but I do know, like,
I would
I
imagine, like, not to cut you off, but I would imagine
yeah,
is because like to me, who's the most dangerous person in the room? It's the person that has nothing to lose, right? So it's the person that
yeah,
hits rock bottom. It's the
yeah,
person that's like if your bank, well, nowadays you can't go negative, but like if your bank account zero, right? Like then
yeah,
it's like you have nothing to risk. It's like
yeah,
if I'm this low, then like now it's like you almost built those habits of like, well, I have nothing to lose. Like I have nothing to
yeah.
lose. Like I'll
No,
just
you're
go
right.
ask, right? And then it got to the point where it just became identity, haha, like part
Mhm.
of like who you are. It's just like
Yeah,
I read that, I just go do, right? Like now
yeah,
it's not even a debate of like, oh,
yeah,
I don't know, should I go
yeah,
talk to him or not? It's like, why don't I just go ask him, right? Like, what's the
yeah.
worst they tell me? No.
And that's even a challenge for myself of something I really tried in recent years is empowering others to do that because I'm a person where like if you're not going to do it, I will, that kind of thing, and just get shit done in person, and kind of all those things you said, yeah. But challenging myself to like sit back and empower other people to do it, I can't do it all. I'm not like
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you can do it all. Yes, you can do it all, but in the reality of the like the place I work and the position I'm in, I cannot do everything. And fortunately, we have the people and we have the resources to be able to do everything. But sometimes, yeah, I was just used to, I think that also came from college and being at a little bit of smaller school. Like I said, I used my resources, but I also recognized the resources we didn't have. That I was like, okay, we don't have this, so I'm going to do it.
yeah,
Right. Or
yeah,
I'm going to start it, or I'm going to, whatever that may be. But so that's been a challenge. It's something I've focused on in recent years is like just empowering other people to take those actionable steps. Or like we have this conversation, sit down, okay, finish it off with, okay, what are you going to do about it? Like
yeah,
what are the next steps? And helping other people realize like once you have a conversation, you got to do something about it after.
yeah.
Um, and
And I
so
think,
I've really honed into that a lot in recent years and recognize that.
and
Yeah.
like when you're trying to accomplish something, this took me a while to like understand, especially it's like the people that like just want to do like the group project, right? I'll just do it all, right? Like
Yeah.
that person,
Yeah.
it's especially talking with like staffs and then even like expanding beyond the staff of like okay like who else should you bring in because there's I
Mhm.
don't god I don't know who said this. I wish I could give credit because this is not me, but it was like this has always stuck with me. It's like somebody told me it's like Ryan, you can go fast alone, but you can go further with a team, a group,
Yeah.
right? With others,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like if you want to do
Mhm.
all this by yourself, it's like that's great. Like you're gonna move quick. But the idea is like you're gonna cap, right? Like your
Yeah.
ceiling's gonna be here versus if you build the team around you, you're gonna go 10 times farther. It may take you a little
Yeah.
bit longer to get there, but your cap and your ceiling is drastically different. And I think that helping even just an individual, whether it be an athlete, of like, hey, it's okay because you're gonna go way further than everybody else
Yeah.
because like you have this team, you have your
Yeah.
coaches, you have somebody like me, you have somebody else over here, you have prehab, you have rehab, you have like all the things like in your corner, I guess so to
Yeah.
speak. to help you get there, which is going to be way farther than you just trying to like grind it out by yourself.
Yeah. And it took me a while to realize that. And it took me
Totally.
situations of like where I left and to realize I did so much work, but I didn't take someone along with me to help them learn. And so like, for example, at Temple, I was doing so much. And when I left, then it was like, well, Jackie did this and Jackie did this and Jackie did this. And I didn't take someone along with me or like necessarily share exactly the steps of what I was doing all the time. So then when I left, it was like almost left them in the dust a little,
Yeah.
because um, and so like I've learned that. And so then again, I'm like, I'm at my new position, or it wasn't here, it was like previous years. And then like trying to help people from my past, like catch them up. And so
Mhm.
that's a mistake I made along the way. Like I could have done better in that of like taking someone along with me so that when it was time to do something else or split ways or do something new, there was someone else that knew how to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and that same quote, I also don't know who it's from that you said, with like taking people like further. That was also told to me and also something I remind myself of and remind my athletes of like just try and bring people along with you. Don't just lead and have everyone follow, right?
Right.
Be have someone alongside you, like push them alongside you along the way. Um, and so but just powerful things here. Lots of good
But it's
stuff.
like like going back to, I know this is like a big like Tony Robbins kind of like quote mentality topic, I guess, is the idea of like modeling, right? Like don't reinvent the wheel. Like you
Mhm.
can condense
Yeah.
decades into years just by modeling other people. And I would say like when I heard that and I started really, really, really reading when I was I don't know, like 26, 27, whenever it was. And like the thing that stood out to me, because I was reading a lot, and like the thing that stood out to me quickly is like all these authors, all these like people I looked up to, so to speak, is like they were like, and I hired this, and this person taught me along the way, and I hired this person,
Mhm.
and this taught me along the way, and I was like, okay, maybe I need to go hire somebody, right? Like I can read
Yeah.
all this,
Yeah.
but I need that person to hold me accountable, to teach me the things, to kind of be in my face a little bit. Um, because every other person had one, right? Like it started with like Tony Robbins, because they all learned from somebody. And so it's like I started going down the rabbit holes. Like Tony Robbins, he's like, I learned from Jim Rohn. So I was like watching all the Jim Rohn stuff. I was like, okay,
Oh
who did
yeah.
Jim Rohn learn from, right? And then it
Yeah.
was like that. And then it was like, okay, who did this person learn from? It's just like they all
Yeah.
had these coaches and mentors. And so first I was spending way too much money on books, and now I spend way too much money on like having coaches because everyone's like, what? And I'm like,
But it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Yeah.
and it again, it's like I call it like the way people see the world. And so it's like you'll never understand because like you see the world this way because you haven't been exposed to like what these
Yes.
people are trying
Yeah.
to do and accomplish. And it's like I'm not trying to model
Yeah.
you, I'm trying to model these people. And so it's okay if you don't do that, but like this is who I want to model.
Yeah. And the word exposure like takes me back. I think growing up I was not exposed to much. And so I talk about how I'm like a total different person now. And I think a lot of people in their life will agree to this. Total different now. Total different person now than I was like in my hometown. It's because college, those best 4 years of your life, not talking about that it was perfect all the time, but I was exposed to so much. And
Yeah.
like moving away from home, even though I was in the same state, I was in a total different world. Like I went from small town to big city and just being exposed to so much. Like I love exposure. That's also why I put myself out there and I'm not afraid to ask questions and I'm not afraid to go to these events and learn things because I recognize how valuable exposure is and just having an open mind. And then if you're talking to someone who is on the total opposite end of you, you can at least understand where they're coming from because you've probably heard it before, you've probably thought about it before and just had a well-rounded mindset of like I understand where you're coming from. This is why I think this or like whatever it may be.
And exposure, and like another word for that too is like experience, and you learn best by experience,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like I always tell, like you can't learn how to ride a bike watching a YouTube video. Like at some
Yeah.
point you got to get on the bike and experience it, right?
And
Like there's,
yeah.
I mean, it's the same, it's coaching, right? Like
Yeah.
yes, you can watch all the videos, but some point you have to get in there and figure out how to
Yeah.
language it, how to teach it,
Yeah.
how to instruct it, like,
Hmm.
because like this person's going to receive it this way and this, and so you got to like relanguage. It's like, okay, hold on,
Yeah.
like let me back up. And so
Yeah.
it's like the experience is the only way. And experience is how like you remember things, right? So it's like,
Hmm.
I'll give you a funny example. Since you've kind of like been around me like at a camp too, is
Yeah.
like telling everybody, I'm like, how many of you guys have had people come in and like it's really boring and you couldn't even tell, like if you saw that person, you'd be like, "Ugh, I don't remember them." I'm like, you're gonna remember me. Why? Because I'm gonna make you feel some type, like you're gonna be like, he's
You're-
so loud and obnoxious. You're either gonna love me or you're gonna hate me, but you're gonna
It's
have an
about,
emotion,
yeah.
right?
It's
Like
about
you're
how
gonna
you make them
experience it.
feel. Yeah.
100%, right? And so I think
Yeah.
that giving understanding of like, no matter, because not everybody's gonna like you, right? Like even the athletes, like there's gonna be some along the way. It's like, I could have done without them, right? Like it
But
just
how can we get the best out of the relationship? How can we get the
totally.
best out of the situation? That was another thing I had to learn. Like I was so in high school, like the peacemaker, wanted to be liked by everyone, was nice to everyone, was so blah, 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 blah. And again, had to learn through my life. That's not realistic. It's
I
not.
had I had to
But
learn too. Is I guess I don't remember. A coach told me like early on is like, Ryan, if everyone likes you, it's like I don't trust you, because that to me is like you're a chameleon. Like
yeah,
you stand for nothing, because
yeah,
you're going with this person, you're going with this group, you're going with this group, and so it's like you literally you don't value yourself because you'll just jump into like whatever group that you're around.
yeah. I
Um,
think you can almost be a chameleon by like, let's say, like sitting in those various rooms. But as long as, again, like you said, you value yourself, you know what you believe in, and all those things, and like sharing that knowledge, right? But also, I think this is where my peacemaker still comes in is just that open-mindedness and like understanding everybody so I can have a conversation with
yeah,
someone that is thinks totally different of me but like being civil. So I don't have to be liked by everyone. I don't have to be friends by everyone. But we can be, I think we can be civil like in the same room thinking the absolute opposite of things.
totally, totally.
Yeah.
And it's learning when like who you can have those conversations with, because I like the analogy I always give is, if somebody's hell bent that 2 + 2 is 5, like I'm not talking to you, right? Like it just is, like I'm not going to convince
Yeah.
you any other way. So I'm not going to be like, dude, you're an idiot, like it like come on, like
Yeah.
I'd be like, cool, like yeah, it just is, all right, like I'm not even going to acknowledge it. And so it's
Yeah.
like I totally agree, is again going back to like learning and exposure and experience, is you want to be around the people that disagree with you, right? Because that makes you go, huh? Because I believe it does two
Yeah.
things: is it either reaffirms what you believe even harder, or it kind of pulls you like, maybe I got
Makes
this
you learn
wrong.
something
Yeah,
else.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you said that because I feel like it's so common for people to say like you want to be surrounded by people like-minded. And yes, in a way, you want to be surrounded by people that are going to work together and help you drive or go wherever you want to go. Absolutely. But I do think it's important to be with people that think differently than you and don't think like you because if you're with the people that think just like you all the time, what how much more are you learning? How much
Yeah,
further, you know? And so I'm glad you said that because I totally agree with that. And I think obviously everyone has their own opinions about it, or some people don't even realize it or think that way. And so that every time that conversation goes up, I'm always like, I think the opposite. I think you should be with um, people that challenge your mindset, help you get in different situations or think differently than where you are now.
and I think too, like this is a silly but real example. Like with me is like, even like when I've owned like I like had my gym, right? It's like I always told the parents, and like now like coming in like tell coaches, I'm like I cuss a lot, right? Like, but here's the thing: is I
Yeah.
never cuss at a kid. Like
At
I
someone. Yeah.
I never cuss at someone. But it goes back to power of words. I go, there's a very big difference if I say, "Hey, get up. Hey, get your butt up. Hey, get your ass up." Right? Like
Yeah.
I'm literally saying all the same things
Yeah. It
versus
wasn't
like,
with a negative intent. Right.
correct.
It's,
And
yeah.
so it's like, if there's a point that I need to like drive, if there's an F bomb in there, like everyone like perks up, right? Everyone's like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God." Right? Like I can think of like going in even like with a group or something, like, how many of y'all want to be some badasses? They're like, oh man, like, all right, like, right, like, versus like somebody that comes in, it's like, I want to help you be great, right? Like they're
Yeah.
like, oh man, here we go again, right? Like, and so it's like
Yeah.
helping them understand there's a reason behind it, but circling back
Yeah.
to the point, it opens up their eyes of like, because they're like,
Yeah.
there's some staffs, coaches, right? And I totally get it. They're like, no cursing like in the practice room or things like
Yeah.
that. Great. Respect that. Just know that like I'm saying this to drive a
Yeah.
specific point home, or again, kind of the nutritious versus delicious, right? Like I'm just using it to like
Yeah.
help them like feel it.
Yeah, that's something what I not only with our athletes, just with people in general. I'm like, as long as you're not saying it at someone or like saying it with a negative intent, then I'm gonna let you say it. Like it is what it is. But if I catch you calling someone or
Yeah,
like
yeah, it's
saying it
totally
at
different.
someone or
Totally
using a
different.
negative intent, I will call you out and I'll be
Yeah,
like, not acceptable.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. And so I think, yeah, I think just that's where, like for me personally but I think that going back to what you said of being around like-minded people is I think that just boils down to like principles and values. Because to me, like
mhm.
principles don't change, right? Like principles are
Yeah.
the things that like remain the same. And so it's like a value might be like, I don't know, like I don't cheat on my spouse, right? Like I'm not gonna hang out with like 10 people that like cheat on their spouse,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like there's a value thing of like I respect you, but like we're probably not running around on the weekends together just because we have different values or principles on
Yeah.
life. I'm not saying you're right or wrong. Like do your thing, bro. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Do
totally
your
on
thing.
you.
Respectfully, do your thing.
Do
But
your thing, but like I
yeah.
just don't value that. So it's like that's where I
Yeah.
may not spend a ton of time just on like real deep hardwired things like that.
Yes. Yeah. Fair.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So all right, couple more questions. Last questions is what's next for you? What's the
I'm
next
gonna
build the cathedral? Don't go
yeah.
generic. Come on, give me the good.
Well, I'm right now accomplishing one of my goals for the year was to be on a podcast. So
Hey, is this
you
your
didn't
first
know that.
one? Is this your first one?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it really?
Well, it's my first one. I did one in college.
Yeah.
Um, but that was like with someone else. It was about like DEI stuff in the group
Mm,
we started. And so there was that, which I was just like so
I
young and
bet.
I'm like I refuse to listen to that podcast. But this is like this year I was like, I just feel like I'm at a place where I have a lot to share and I've learned a lot in recent years of through my journey and stuff. And I was like, I want to go on a podcast, but I wasn't like, can I go on your podcast? Can I get it wasn't like that. I was like, someone like it'll happen, it'll come
That's funny.
um as long as I keep doing a good job at what I'm doing. And so here we are.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's like maybe a month ago. Somebody
Yeah.
else, like right before
Yeah.
they're like, just so you know, this is my first because they were like, it's funny, like, very similar to like how I'm calling you out a little bit, is the night before they were like, hey, do you have like a list of like bullet point things to like think about? I
Yeah.
was like, I don't. And the
No.
reason was so this person has like PhD, like I was like, yeah, we're
Wow.
not talking about any of that, right? Like in the and so afterwards when we got off, she was just like, yeah, I'm kind of like not looking forward to the next one because this one was kind of like fun. It was just open-ended,
Yeah,
right?
chill
Versus like
and
they
open-ended.
they
Yeah.
want to like talk about my dissertation and like,
Yeah.
all I'm like, "Ugh, I don't even want to know, but like you can tell me
This
if you
is
want
more
to.
fluent conversation, like, yeah.
Yeah. And I like to think of it as like, I guess the best way to describe it is like a conversation versus an interview. I feel like most people treat it like an interview, like a podcast.
Yeah,
They like have bullet points of like, so tell me about your time at
fair.
Mizzou.
Yeah. And even like on that point, podcasts or interviews, like actual interviews, I'm like, it's a conversation. Like they're just trying to get you to know you and you're just trying to get to know them too. Like if it's for a job, they want to see if you're the right fit, but you should also be seeing if they're the right fit. So
Totally.
you're just trying to get to know each other. And so I try to tell them that too, because obviously you can only say so much, but until they experience it, they're like, oh, you're right. It was like not as big of this thing as I thought it was gonna be. But circling back to the next steps, well, here at Mizzou, and it's going great, and I'm absolutely loving it. Another blessing in disguise, like never expected to be here.
Yeah.
Um, and so right now is like the prime time to just kind of plan for next year, like sit down, okay, what can be better? Or like what new things, like whether it's a presentation or an activity or specific workout. Like, what can I put together that is going to help take this team to the next level?
Yeah.
Um, so I know
So
it's
generic.
kind of simple,
We want
but
we want to be better. It's
that's
the season.
no, but that is like where I'm at right now. Of I've had 1 year under my belt of just kind
Yeah.
of figuring how things flow, figuring out how people lead.
Mm.
Where can I either do more or like dive into more or do better at. So yeah, this year was kind of figuring it out this past year, and now going into this year, I think it's really the like an even better time to dive deep and really pay attention to those little things and plan ahead, because like last year I got hired in July, so I missed the first half of summer of
Yeah.
like the planning process and stuff, so I just jumped right into it. Um and so, that's where we're at for the next year and figuring it out.
I feel you. I feel you. All right. Last question.
Yeah.
If you were in a stadium with 100,000 people and you could
Yeah.
only leave them with one message, what would your message be?
I'm circling back to the not only give yourself grace, but give others grace, because, it's everybody's first life. And
Yeah.
we're all learning every single day.
Yeah. 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 I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
All right. So actually, do have one more question though, because I'm always just curious, like with
Yeah.
assistants.
Yeah.
Um, Now that you've had 1 year, I don't know if it was a goal before, to be a head coach. Is that still like A, was that a thing? And B, like, is that still kind of like a
Yeah.
internal drive, like kind of like futuristic down the road?
Yeah, when I got into coaching, or even when I was a student coach, I always knew at some point I wanted to be a head coach. Absolutely. I think when I was in college, I was like, I want to be a head coach like as soon as possible, as young as
Yeah.
possible. Like, that's cool, all of that. And now with 1 year under my belt and just in the place I'm in, like, we're doing so much great stuff here, and I'm learning so much from the staff. Like, it's very well balanced. And so like I'm in no rush to become a head
Yeah.
coach.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, when the opportunity is right, like, I'm always open to opportunities. When it's right, it's going to be right. But right now I'm happy where I'm at, and I'm learning so much as an assistant and doing great so many great things
Yeah.
in the position I'm in. And so again, I maybe used to think that like when you're the head coach, you just like do more or more successful. Like, that was probably also me being like, if you're not gonna do what I am, I'm controlling all, doing all.
Yeah.
And so I've just learned a lot, and I'm very appreciative of the position I'm in now, and know I can go far with the people I'm with and in the position in the place that I'm in.
Yeah. Because I'm always curious too. It's like as people get into it, I think most people have a desire. Like that's it's, it's a little bit like cliche comment too. Like I want to be a head coach one day. And then I feel like there's
Yeah.
a nice chunk of people that get into it. It's like, you know what? Like I kind of just like being an assistant and just like focusing on
Yeah.
like the coaching and the relationships like with the
Yeah.
athletes. Like I don't know that I want because it's two different hats, right? Like the
Yeah.
analogy I always give is like the head coach is either mom or dad and the assistants are like sister brother, right? Like there's
Yeah.
certain things they're going to come to you about that they're not going to go to the head coach about. It
Yeah.
just is, right? Like they
Yeah.
feel like they have,
Yes.
in some sense they do have a little bit more power and pull over them. So it's like, hey, look, can I have a conversation with you? Like don't tell top dog
Excellent.
Susie
Yeah.
about this, right? Like this is
Yeah.
between me and you kind of type thing.
Hmm.
And so it's like some people just enjoy
Yeah.
that more.
No, absolutely. The aspirations are still there, but I think the not necessarily the journey, but the focus of the journey has like shifted.
Yeah.
Again, coming out, I was like, I want to be a head coach
Now.
ASAP, as young as
Yeah.
possible. Like, just be that person. And now I'm like, I'm enjoying where I'm at, and I'm learning so much, and I realize I can make a strong impact as an assistant coach. You don't have to be a head coach to do
Totally.
great things.
Totally. Totally. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, dude, this has been awesome. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. It went great.
Wow, we did the first one.
Yeah, my first
And
one, my first true one.
there
Yeah.
you go. Until next time, everybody. Peace.